5 days before training camp opens, the New Orleans Saints 90-man roster is nearly the same as it was for mandatory minicamp back in June, despite some talk since then, especially in July, about possibly bringing in some free agents and signing them. Well, we'll break down. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Kind of one of the pre-training camp questions. And another one is, will the Saints sign Tyler Shough before camp opens? A little bit to break down here. Let's talk about it. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So you talk 90-man roster, and I guess technically we're talking 91-man roster because we have a roster exemption for Charlie Smith. It's pretty close to the same roster you had when minicamp ended. You signed Cam Akers, running back, Seth Green, tight end, Jaden Price, cornerback, Barry Wesley, a left tackle, and you released Trey Fluell and cornerback and Xavier Valade, a running back. Some adjustments to your roster, but not like the impact of some of the free agents, except for maybe Cam Akers. We'll see. Um, that you were talking about kind of during minicamp and OTAs before that and into the end of June and into July, bringing up names like Asante Samuel, um, Leo Collins, Jonathan Bullard, even Gabe Davis. So you kind of had four significant veteran players kind of either in contact with or showed up or just picking up phone calls. Like that's the kind of couple weeks ago, Leo Collins said, yeah, I've been talking to Kellen Moore this offseason. But since all these initial reports hit over that about roughly a month span of time, it's been crickets after that. No, like real follow up. No, what's going on? Are we still interested? At least for me, I can't quite get a vibe of what's going on, and not mentioned a whole lot. Comes up every now and again. Now, Samuel technically could be a medical issue still waiting to be cleared. That was supposed to happen in July, and it still could. And then once that happens, maybe something happens there. But in the case of like him and Lyle Collins, Samuel played for Staley. Collins has played for Kellen Moore, very familiar with each other. So I don't think it'd be a big stretch to say if they don't show up right away. If they do show up, it's not going to be a big deal. Jonathan Bullard, he was an interesting one. I was kind of excited when we did bring him in, going, I just have so much doubt on the defensive line, especially in that interior spot that he plays. Not necessarily familiar with any of our coaches quite as much as Collins or Samuel, but familiar with the scheme. He's played it a lot in the NFL, just a lot like Devin Godshaw, who we traded for. Very similar type situation. Thought we'd at least bring him in. But again, nothing really going on there. Gabe Davis, just a um, veteran wide receiver. It's Buffalo and Jacksonville, obviously. And, it's a guy capable of making some big plays and then had some nice seasons at times. In case of all four of them, you kind of look at him and go, yeah, in some way, shape, or form, possibly could make sense. If you bring them in, I think in all their cases, you want them to be 100% healthy, and then 100% has to be, a good contract and not going back into our old habits of overpaying for not enough, so to speak. But at the same time, I think they were, for the most part, if they stay in healthy, low risk, potential high reward, it was worth the conversation. And the conversation just doesn't seem to be going on very much right now. Not even really a rumor. But I do recognize that at the moment, with the dual headaches of trying to sign our second round pick, more on that in a moment, in a little bit. And then also at the same time, going around the NFL player extensions that are starting to happen, and especially at some positions, wide receiver, cornerback, offensive tackle. Seen a few of those over the last month or so. Could potentially have an effect on when and if we're going to be looking at some point off season or the season of trying to extend people like maybe Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed or Alante Taylor, Trevor Penning, who all fall in that category. So, as part of this newfound fiscal responsibility and the fact that around the league, you know, the interchangeable parts of, and I hate to say it that way, but sometimes when you get to this point in the season, that's what they're looking at, veteran and young players, right? Not only within your own roster, but as it's happening around the league, at the same time, with the kicking in the money that's involved and everybody paying attention. Like, that's on the free agent side, but the money involved on the um, re-signing or extension sign, going, well, what's the going rate? And everybody thinks, well, we knew what it was, but you may have a contract drop that everybody goes, come on, man, what are you doing? I got to re-sign my guy now. It's going to cost me more if I want to make it happen. So it's like a massive football 3D, 4D version of chess that goes on around the NFL and externally in teams at the same time. It's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, and it can all be moving at one time. So there's a good chance, not just the Saints, but not a lot of activity in free agency. With all this going on, is everybody's just kind of backed off for a bit to get the last of the draft picks in, signed and in camp and ready to go. And then you may see some perk up on free agency after that. And I think what the Saints are looking at, like I said, mostly makes sense. Can kind of see where, you know, they're not there on the 23rd, but they're there with 4 or 5 days later if we feel like we need to bring somebody in. I get it. I If the Saints are kind of taking a deep breath approach as it comes to free agency and thinking, let's not get in a hurry as part of their newfound fiscal responsibility that we hope they do have and they're going to stick to. But it could very well be as simple as that, as like, look, we may not have to dip our foot into the free agent pool just yet. It may come eventually. There's no point in getting ahead of ourselves. And to top it all off, the last kicker in no free agent signing is sometimes, let's just say they may be realizing, we don't need to jump in the beginning of July in the training camp. Some of these guys are like, they're veterans, and again, possibly familiar with some of the coaching staff or the organization itself. Going, like maybe let it get a little deeper into camp before we really start looking. You see that every year where there's one or two big free agent signings kind of hitting in training camp when interest gets peaked. Maybe some of that going on also. But I think overall, the roster, and maybe they felt this way coming out of minicamp. Maybe they felt this way going into minicamp, but I don't know. I just get the feeling right now that they're not, I don't think they're in any way, shape, form not interested in bringing in better personnel or free agents. I think it really boils down to just not at this moment. I'm hoping that's what it is. Just a little patience, a little, we don't have to overpay or do something crazy right now. Take a deep breath. Let's relax just a second. Deal with these issues first. Get ready to open camp. And then 2, 3, 4 days into it, that might be the point where we start having conversations, picking up the phone, start calling some of these guys again and kind of see where we're at. Before we dive into this, just want to touch upon a couple of things that I really probably should have mentioned outright in the last video when we were talking about Chuck and the Saints and where they were at the time. Because in the comments I was seeing, and I get where it's coming from, and I don't necessarily disagree with the principle of, kind of, we've bad contracts. We're talking about that and probably continue to talk about that in this video. Um, can get you into problems. Some of it was some comments about almost like who should start, Rattler or Shuck, or which are all valid points. Which is why I didn't want to get into the weeds of commenting and just kind of address it as a whole, which is basically agree totally with almost all of it. However, it's not really relevant to this because in the greater scheme of things, and this is what we're talking about, like the 3D chess of what goes on around the NFL, we just so happened to draft Tyler Shough, quarterback, at 40. And that kind of set up for this discussion with all these second round picks trying to get as much as that guarantee as they can. Because I think we all agree quarterback is the most important position on the field. He was the only quarterback taken in the second round. He was taken with the eighth pick in the second round. So pretty much near the top. Any team that does that is pretty much sending the message, regardless of who the player is and what their position is. that area of the second, you're like solid contributor, potential starter at minimum, if not an actual starter. It's basically the same spot we drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry last year. Year two, looking to be the starter. So just generally speaking, it just so happened to mesh with the players, with Shough kind of able to lead the charge because he was the only quarterback taken in the round, and he was taken so high in the second round. And to boot, according a starting quarterback job open, that's where all that came from. Well, I'm the probable starter. You need to give me 100%. We could have drafted a punter named John Smith from East State University, none of us never heard of. They would be having this the same discussion, the same, because all the players in the second round are. So who they are and what they play doesn't matter, except for the fact that if no quarterback was taken in the second round, the next most important position near the top of the second round, whether you left tackle or an edge rusher, someone would have stepped up with some excuse going, this is why I should get 100% guaranteed money. And that's where the NFL finds itself. So just wanted to clarify that it's not necessarily all about Tyler Shough or even all about the quarterback position. It's just convenient to everybody. Well, not for the teams, for the player side of it to have to be put in that position. That being said, it's still going to be driven by what everybody else around is doing. And when you're looking at this top end, we showed the video the other day, and I'll post it up somewhere here and make sure it's on the end card. The salaries basically already written. Everybody knows about what they're going to make. It's just how much of that is guaranteed. How much do I have to stick around in the club? Same thing for the first rounders. It's just now matriculating down the second round, and we showed the percent change from 23 to 24 and how everybody in the top end has been inching up closer and closer to being 100% guaranteed anyway. This set of circumstances just all came together to force it to happen this particular draft. And we had, since I did that video and I had it happened right after I uploaded the video, Frisco signed Collins. He came in about 88% of guaranteed was the number. I haven't actually crunched the numbers on that. That's just what's being reported. 10% change over what the 43rd pick got in 2024. Schlesinger and Higgins were the two that had signed way back in May and started this. Well, this morning or late last night, I'm not sure which, Amanawari, Seattle, safety. I mean, he's a safety, third guy taken in this draft. He's got his 100%. But you can start seeing that percent change creeping up. Schlesinger and Higgins were walking into a situation where last year's guys were so close to 100%. The number looks big, but it looks a lot bigger when you're looking at the 35th overall last year compared to what Imanawari is getting as far as percentage of guaranteed. It's 11.9. Collins at the back end of this list, and I just stopped at him because he's the last one to sign, and he's only 3 picks behind Shough, got a 10% jump to 88. So more and more, I think this is getting locked in on the low side. Shough's getting 90% plus. I kind of thought that when Collins signed. Now I think it's probably pretty close. That is the minimum, and the push is going to come to what happens up on the 100% end going towards a Monowari. Because the only real game that's getting played here, I think, is they, I almost feel like right at this point, the Saints likely have, after Collins signed, they probably ripped up some contracts, and then all that's left are all the ones they had basically pre-written, starting at 90% guaranteed, 91, 92, all the way to 100. Waiting to see how this flops out, because I don't think Shough's just going to sign, and I don't think they can talk him down any lower than 90 at this point, maybe even 91. Junkins would be the next one to fall, but he's got himself into a lot of trouble down in Broward County over the weekend, and he's going to be dealing with that, and that probably puts 36 on hold. And so the next group's Savea, offensive lineman, Miami, then Trayvon Henderson, running back for New England, Luther Burden, Chicago. Those are the next group to go, and you can bet they're all trying to push for the 100% guarantee. So, in the greater scheme of things, while not much has happened in the reality, I think it's getting closer because the lane's getting narrow, you know, and no matter what the public opinion or the fan opinion or anything is about what Shuck's doing or what team's doing, that's what I said. It's billionaires versus millionaires. But because of the rookie salary pay scale, and the fact now you have a player picked after him, and the multiple players picked in front of him, and that lane is just getting narrowed down where eventually it's going to get pinned in. I think it's going to happen quick, having those two sign, and the rest are going to start falling in. And also in the video, we showed that as you get further down the second, the gap just widens in that guaranteed money. So at some point, they're all going to sign when they realize, well, last year's guy got 50%. We're not going to get ours up to 80. We'll have to settle for 60 or 65. And I think those seconds probably start falling pretty quick in the next couple of weeks. Um, and even as far as Shuck, if it isn't inked by when he needs to report, I have a feeling he's going to be there anyway. He just won't do anything because he's not signed. So I think they can show up and be on premise without a contract. I'm almost positive they can't participate in anything. So, you know, it's something. I don't think it's that far away. Don't think it's really a big deal. And it's just something that the 3D, 4D chess of all these pieces moving, players, organizations, and then how they interact with each other. It just fell into an anomaly where this was able to work out, and players are able to try to leverage as much of their position and their draft pick as they can into grabbing more guaranteed money. And I'm honestly, I've negotiated salaries myself. I can't blame them for that. Trying to get a little extra money and a little extra guarantee. So that's kind of where we're sitting now. I said, I think just the conclusion of it is I don't think any big jump, at least in the immediate future. You know, gotta admit I was wrong. I thought for sure we would be tweaking the back end of the roster a little bit with some potential free agent signings that, you know, were for us kind of low risk but high reward potentially. However, um, the Saints could just really be comfortable with the 90 man as it is, and they're not really interested in looking down that path unless something happens where they have to move on for a player or the player you know injures himself and is going to miss time and they're going to have to do something to bring in a replacement. So I get that part of it. And they could be. And this is I'm kind of hoping it's this one while I was trying to think this thing through is maybe knowing most of those guys that they just kind of brought in, talked to, had conversations with, been in contact with, whatever was going on with that, knowing it's not going to take them a whole long period of time to get them acclimated, ready to go, as long as they're 100% healthy, right? Um, we basically could give that one last ditch effort for those young guys at camp to really, or not even the young guys, whoever may happen, it may be older veterans on the back end of that roster who may or may not make the 90 man to begin with, going, well, this is their last opportunity to show that they're in the conversation. Because if not, then player, let's just say defensive back X, doesn't fit the bill within a couple of weeks. They decide to release him. And because Asante Samuel is suddenly available and they know they can go sign him. Just as an example, not saying it's going to happen. Because I kind of like the way that breeds that little competitiveness. Um, that I I think it needs to kind of come back in because I think over the last couple of seasons, just the way things were structured, and this both in the organization and the money involved paying for players, you just had guys locked into jobs they knew they weren't going to lose, and I think that's kind of going by the wayside. And I think it's a good thing as long as it's handled properly in the sense of competition and with the understanding. Like you got to step up to be here. It's just the bottom line because if not, we do have opportunities to go elsewhere. But I think the bigger when I was kind of thinking about this, the bigger take that I kind of came across is, and the question of the Saints walking a tightrope here in this rebuild, especially right now in 2025, and I feel like they are because I think it's a big job to begin with. They're trying to rebuild, the foundation, the culture. We just talked about accountability, bringing accountability back throughout the organization. It's not just on players; it's on coaches, it's on office. It's dare say it's on Ms. Gale because she owns the team. She kind of let it get to this point, and it's part of her too. Regardless, going everybody goes, no, no, no. We got to get back to what we were and not doing it the same old way we always did it. We have to find the new path on how to get there. But part of that is while you're trying to do all that, you have to be competitive on the football field because you can't try to do all that stuff, then roll out and get your ass kicked for 17 weeks in 2025. Because what's going to end up happening is you're going to lose buy in the organization, on the team, fan base, media, everybody. There's so many examples around the NFL of that being of happening. At the same time, you want to develop young players. So there's another tightrope you got to walk because playing some of those young guys may mean you do get your teeth kicked in a little bit. But there's that fine line between getting beat, but being competitive to really getting your teeth kicked in. First time I'm in an expression. The second time I mean for real. So while you're doing all that, the front office also has to accept, fiscal responsibility is a phrase I think that has kind of become in vogue with the Saints lately because we're starting to see what it looks like when you do it and the possibilities it opens up when you stick to it. That's part of this too, sticking to it. So when you're talking about the Shuck contract situation, yeah, they're pinching pennies, or in this case, they're pinching $1 million or 2 million or whatever it comes down to. I get it, but still, I understand the thought process. I understand what they're trying to do. But at the same time, I know what Shuck wants to do, and I don't blame either one of them for holding the stances they have. But it's going to kind of be decided for them also. But if you can walk the tightrope between these three things where everybody involved, and I do mean from the lowest point of the organization to the owner, to the media, to the fans, to the NFL in general, finally understand and realize, the foundation is there. Their cultural foundation, everything that they did well for decade and a half, 2 decades, that made them one of the best organizations in football. Well, they've rediscovered it. They've redeveloped it. They've whatever you want to put on it. They're not the same exact organization. They're not trying to be. They're trying to be a better version of that, and they're getting back to it. Thumbs up if we can get there. But at the same time, you have to do it with your younger players. You have to do it with the contract situation. And we know this all to be true. As Saints fans watching this, you know it's true because we find ourselves in this mess because we watched all that stuff not be true the last 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons. And that's what went ahead and got us in the mess we're in now, quite frankly. So, we keep saying doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is definition of insanity. Well, I think we are doing something different, but in a way, but it's got to work. And it's going to be a tightrope between all these phases to kind of keep everything in line because eventually, when it all starts coming together and working, I want to say it becomes easier. It just becomes less of a tightrope. So I got for you today. This will wind up the week, and I probably will, as all things, when you do recorded stuff and get it uploaded on YouTube, something like 15 these guys are probably signed while I'm filming this or are about to. We'll probably sign 3 free agents over the weekend. But hey, I I kind of think that things are slowing down a little bit, have been. That's what July kind of is in the NFL, but it's starting to pick up the pace again. Starting next week, weather permitting, I'll be there on the 23rd, at 9 a.m. the first practice, and really want to see, and more importantly, want to get the feel of what's going on there. I don't know if anybody was able to make the mini camp ones. I had tickets to one, just couldn't go. So if anybody was there, I'm sure we've all seen the people who were there, stuff online and some of the coverage and all. Just I want the feeling of how's this really look, and hopefully again, weather permitting, I'll get the chance. I believe Wednesday. So thank you all for showing up today. First time here, you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe, thumbs up from everybody. Helps me out an awful lot. We're growing. We're doing great. Let's keep the momentum going. Don't quite know what I'll be popping off at the beginning of next week in video. I'm sure something will come up over the weekend. Um, and then since I'll be going Wednesday morning, we might be a little off schedule next week, but training camp picks back up. I think we'll be pretty much locked in to more or less this Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule that we were doing, and going to try to stick to it. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and hoot at.